today's topic is Nigeria. So Emily, tell us about the history of Nigeria and the pre-British involvement.
Well, Kyle, the culture and empires of Nigeria date back to almost the 5th century BC and was controlled by various different powerful kingdoms. Islam was introduced to the area around the 11th century. The Hausa were a small group, as we know from class, the Hausa and Fulani. Both of them are predominantly Muslim as well. And they were largely controlling the northern area of what we now know as Nigeria. The Yoruban tribe dominated most of the south, kind of in between the coast, and many of the tribal groups were also trading groups and had involvement with Britain way before British colonialism. And they were involved in the 1800s doing slave trading or wealth trading and a variety of other things.
How do these historic cultures contribute to the current climate of Nigeria?
The two biggest groups are Hausa and Fulani and the Yoruban groups. And Hausa and Fulani is predominantly Muslim since the 14th century and 19th century respectively. And Yoruba is a mix of indigenous beliefs, Christianity, and Islam. Because a large majority of the tribal groups in Nigeria are grounded in Islamic beliefs, how they view the law and engagement with others is based off Islamic law. In fact, 12 of the northern states govern their religion based on the Islamic code.
Alec, we had talked earlier about something along these lines. Do you have something to add to what Emily just said?
Yeah, definitely. Along with what Emily was talking about, like the reason for so much civil unrest within Nigeria actually stems from like back when the British Empire colonized the area. They actually divided the land of Africa based off of geological locations like rivers and mountains. Therefore, instead of basing it off of the actual tribes inhabiting the area, many of them which were warring and were very against each other, like by dividing it based off geography, it actually put many of these tribes within the same country, which stems now to like these three tribes, the Igbos, Hausa Fulani, and the Yorubas, many of which don't get along anymore. And they're actually trapped within this political boundary.
Oh great, because that leads to my next question to Emily. How did British involvement affect Nigeria?
Nigeria was not truly Nigeria as we know it until the British began to colonize. From the early 1800s, many parts of Africa were involved in the trade industry with Britain, and many expeditions were sent out to Nigeria, and Britain was very interested in Nigeria. From the 1806 to about the mid-1800s, they sent explorers and anti-slavery activists and missionaries and traders to all get involved in the area. And as trade ramped up, British interest in colonialism ramped up as well. And from the 1900s to the 1960s, the British were in control of this area that was constantly changing, that had no real boundaries based on the way the tribes are set up in Nigeria. And it has been leading into the current times. It's been very difficult for Nigeria to keep peace and stability given with how diverse all of their ethnic groups are.
So Taro, how are the key political institutions organized in Nigeria?
Nigeria is organized as a democratic republic, and it's based on the U.S. model, where the president is the head of state and also the head of government. There's a legislative branch composed of the Senate and the House of Representatives, and there's also a judicial branch, where the Supreme Court of Nigeria is at the very top.
So is this comparable to the U.S.?
Even though it's a democratic republic, patrimonialism and prebendalism are really stronger than democracy, where the president is the head, and government jobs and resources are handed out as a reward to the supporters, which is in direct conflict with the democratization of Nigeria.
Speaking of that, you had thrown out the word Praetorianism, correct?
Yeah,
do you know anything about that?
Yeah, Praetorianism, that's where the military actually takes control of the government and has the majority influence because they have the guns and weaponry to back themselves. And with Nigeria, with these three different tribes that we were talking about, the largest tribe being the House of Fulani, the ones that are holding the power, they're the ones that are able to give the resources that they have from the government to the people, because they're going to give it to their people, obviously, versus the other tribes they're against. And by using the Praetorianism and like this military-controlled government, they're able to hold their power, and it gives that illegitimacy towards elections, and they stay in power.
So, Taro, can you give us a general idea of the current state of political institutions in Nigeria?
For every country, a key institution will be the political party system. Whereas in the U.S., it's bipartisan, and the political parties have lasting power. In Nigeria, they're very factionalized. There's just a bunch of them. And they're all based on ethnic, tribal, and regional differences. And because they are, there's no real national political party. They're all regional. Linkage institutions, which are the institutions that connect the public and the government, in Nigeria, they're not very well developed yet because Nigeria has gone through many political changes and it's only recently being democratized. So as a result, the linkage institutions are very fluid, so they change a lot.
Now, we have actually some questions coming in from some of our viewers.
Twitter user Green Backpack asks, Kyle, tell us about the political structure of Nigeria.
Okay, well, regarding the political structure, if you go to onlinenigeria.com/government viewers, you can read about the political structure, and I'm just going to go ahead and read it out to you just to save you guys a little bit of time. But Nigeria is a federal government seemingly modeled after the United States, 36 states, and has adopted English common law. Online Nigeria states significantly the Constitution affirms that Nigeria is one indivisible and indissoluble sovereign state whose constituent units are bound together by a federal arrangement.
Twitter user CancerZone9 asks, Nigeria is a very oil-rich country. How much does this country produce and what is the outcome of the economy?
Nigeria is actually very interesting when it comes to oil. According to U.S. Energy Information Administration, Nigeria produced approximately 2.53 million barrels of oil per day in 2011. It also believes Nigeria's oil accounts for 95% of export earnings and about 40% of government revenues. CIA reports Nigeria's export earnings in 2012 was roughly $97.46 billion. If the 95% estimation still applied, this means about $92 billion of the export earnings came directly from oil trade.
Looking at these numbers, I see that there's a ton of wealth coming into Nigeria from their natural resources. However, if you look at the country as a whole, it seems as though they're still second world, third world, right? Like there's not too much education, there's not too much public programs coming from the government, which kind of brings to that whole idea of the resource curse of how with a portalitism government where there's a kind of illegitimacy and someone's trying to hold the power, they're also holding the economics spawned from the resources for themselves and only giving out those resources to their people again. And by that, that just shows it's kind of ties into the American politics and how lately we've seen Occupy Wall Street in the 99 percentile versus the one where the elites, the ones with the power, are holding 40% of the country's economic power. They are holding more money within the top 300 people than the rest of the entire country. So that just shows mass that illegitimacy, a lot of corruption, but that's also, that comes just from survival techniques and they're trying to, give money and give power to their people. So it's kind of a split decision on that. It's not totally fair for the rest of the country of Nigeria, but at the same time, you have because of these ideologies, if you don't hold power and relinquish it to another tribe, they're just going to do the same exact thing, and then your people are going to be in trouble. So it's a very interesting issue, but that's about much I gotta say about that.
One more. We have Twitter user @lols just tweeted, Kyle, what is your opinion on the level of legitimacy in Nigeria? Well, that's a great question, and I actually figured that would be coming up, so I have this great list of some quotes that I can read for you. And we have been throwing out legitimacy a lot. To some of you viewers who don't know exactly what that is, I'm going to go ahead and give you an example. Okay, so we have someone who wrote The Cycle of Legitimacy Crisis in Nigeria, a Theoretical Exploration. His name was Agundia. And since its attainment of independent nationhood in 1960, Nigeria's political landscape has been plagued by political instability. It has stumbled from one political crisis to another. These manifestations of political instability are the symptoms of basic system pathology, namely a crisis of legitimacy.
What's interesting about that, though, is that even with that lack of legitimacy in the country, that Nigeria is currently experiences the longest running period of civilian rule since its independence in 1960.
Well, that's just because the House of Fulani, the largest group, is the one in power. Therefore, there's a higher percentage of people that are going to be more economically based and better off, and the reason for all of the social unrest just comes down to the whole ideal of tolerance and how, because they come from different religious backgrounds, they're having a hard time agreeing with one another because it's impossible for someone to be wrong. Like, they are wrong, therefore they can't agree. But the reason that these statistics show that they've done better in these last years, like I just said, comes from the largest group is in power, therefore the majority is doing well, so it will look like that they're doing better. If you put the Arubas or the Igbas in power, they're going to have a smaller percentage of people that they're going to give wealth to, so therefore you would see an extreme disproportion of wealth. You'd see such a small group of people with such a high amount of wealth because of this resource curse and the illegitimacy and the corruption, whereas that'll make the rest of the nation suffer.
All right, guys, thank you so much for coming here today. We've answered a lot of great questions and brought up some very interesting ideas. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. Viewers, if you would like some of your questions answered, please tweet at us at the Gorgie Update, and we will hopefully try and update you next time, and you might receive a tweet from us. Thank you.